In the last 17 years of his working life, my father was finally rewarded with having landed a great job as first, a maintenance engineer, and then a senior locksmith with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. As an actor who has spent 20 years trying to crack America, the day I reached the Bloodline set and found my name on a chair next to Sissy Spacek's was the happiest of my working life. Design is important. I spend much of my working life as a designer. But how can you design for materials if you don't know what they can do? The feel of them, the possibilities, the capabilities? These are things you learn only by working with materials all the time. Frankly, a university degree is not much help in that. Recreating the experience of, say, bereavement in my own head is pretty rough. I was used to switching off from emotions every day of my working life as a journalist, but in fiction, you have to feel it 100%, or else it's a flat experience for the reader. I spend my working life pretending to be someone else. I certainly don't feel any more super than any of the other people I knew in my working life. Quite the reverse. In fact, guilt is my middle name, and I think anybody who does do that thing with work and children and everything knows exactly what I'm talking about. I took 18 months away to have my son, Joseph, and it was the biggest break I'd ever had in my working life of nearly 20 years. From the employee's standpoint, in 1935, Social Security was a big gamble. Employees would be required to participate in the program, contributing a percentage of their income for their entire adult working life. Teaching was my transition from student life to working life. In those days, our system of education was a little different. The number of students in each class was huge. I think in political science general, which I taught, it was around 100. All filmmakers want the option to make another film, to have it not always be such an uphill battle, for it to be our life, our working life. Swapping out the 9-to-5 for a more agile, independent working life brings with it one other huge benefit, a channel for self-actualization. I think for every player it's different. Most guys play for as long as they can until they're sort of pushed out the door. But I do think there are guys who realize there's a whole 40 years of a working life ahead of you when you're 25 or 30 and you want to get on with it. Management gurus in general are, I think, best avoided. All too often they reduce your working life to a list of rules to be followed. Targets are aimed at, goals kicked at. You then break the rules or forget them and, hey presto, you start beating yourself up. One of the things that I found very confronting in my early working life was that people thought I was some sensitive doe-eyed lovelorn boy, because they'd seen me do that a couple of times. What tends to happen is you get a run of similar roles. Throughout my working life, I've been either one of very few women or the most senior woman in the place. For me, the card catalog has been a companion all my working life. To leave it is like leaving the house one was brought up in. Obviously I've spent most of my working life with men and they have this way of operating which seems a bit alien to me. In any economy, the entire population is supported by the part of it that is working. All other things being equal, it thus follows that the most attractive acquisition a society can have is a young adult, whose childhood and education has already been paid for, but whose entire working life still lies ahead. My working life has always been wrapped up in doing my job to the best of my abilities and doing the best for my family. It is not a contest between the two. Every year of my working life, I have been fortunate enough to earn more money than I have spent. What was fantastic about Scott and Bailey was the opportunity to engage with female characters that were absolutely committed to their working life but also had to cope with all of the outside stress and pressure of their real lives. It's important in show business to have friends who understand the cut and thrust of everyday working life and the constant rejection. I brought my sons into the business to extend my working life, so I could keep my hand in the business. Mine were informal mentors. They were all in my working life. I take so much from my life. I have my shooting and my fishing. I have my working life. I have my relationship with my children. I find the education I got from living in Derby and being streetwise and knowing the people that I know, the lessons that I had to learn growing up, have set me in good stead for this kind of working life. As is the case for many people with multiple sclerosis, the effects of weakened limbs, spasticity, and fatigue had cut my working life in half. Yet not a single GP, neurologist or nurse, and none of the MS websites, had mentioned the use of neuroenhancers for the treatment of neurological fatigue. To start your working life after you've graduated from school and university, it takes you a long time to get started in the real world. Today, Kids are not out into the workforce until 27 or 30 years of age. By the time I was 30, I had 6 kids and 60 trucks. Prince Philip's principal role since 1952 has been to support the Queen. Alongside that, he has created his own working life as founder, fellow, patron, president, chairman, or member of at least 837 organizations, as well as a colonel or colonel-in-chief, field marshal, admiral, air commodore 42 times over. In my mind, the Calmac ferry is linked with the joy of arrival, the sadness of departure, the loss of loved ones brought home by ferry to rest in island soil. It is friendships made and a working life begun. I have tried to keep my eco-anxiety at bay, to box it into my working life, but every month this becomes more difficult. The rising sense of panic I feel is entirely rational. We should all be feeling it, but we can't live with it through every hour of every day. I deliberately keep myself apart from a lot of stuff. I don't tweet, I don't do Facebook, I don't blog, and that's largely because I spend my working life staring at a screen and hitting a keyboard. I am trying to cut down on that, not increase it. My working life, I really lost confidence. I literally couldn't put myself out there in the way that I used to. I've had an enormously privileged working life. I'm still spending my working life trying to mine people's souls, and now they're complimenting me in reviews on the amount of time I spend in the gym, on the definition of my triceps. In the mid-1990s, when I stopped having to run from the shows to the film developing lab and first saw digital images, I blessed technology and was convinced that my working life was changing for the better. I was a teacher most of my life, which I loved. I had a very happy working life, and when I retired, I thought I must do something, and I've always read a lot of fiction. You learn so much from fiction. My sentimental education came mostly from fiction, should say, so I thought I'd try. My parents didn't make a lot of money. My dad was not a high school graduate, he didn't have a career as such, he was a printing salesman essentially for most of his working life. I can't see Jeremy Clarkson having very many serious problems in his working life in the long run. The dull externals of the screenwriter's working life are well known. We are the people taking up too much table space at cafes. Generally speaking, there's some quality of compulsion that attaches itself to the idea of the list. It's true that lists organize the daily chaos of working life, but the impulse to make lists has to do with something more than either administrative practicalities or the record of a creative process. I'm from a more rigorous journalistic background. If I say a car is good or bad, the viewers can trust the fact that I have spent all my working life reviewing cars. I have had demanding jobs since I was 18 years old. I have had 2 sick days in all my working life. Originally, theater was my life. It was what I assumed I'd spend my working life doing, if I was lucky. Then along came movies. We must make working life more human. When my daughter Zulika was born, I was at the pinnacle of my working life as a model, and I pulled myself in two trying to cope with being both a mother and a career girl. May not music be described as the mathematics of the sense, mathematics as music of the reason? The musician feels mathematics, the mathematician thinks music, music the dream, mathematics the working life. Companies can't offer every employee a vertical rise through the ranks, and some employees' careers will level off. Without the prospects of further advancement, how do you keep these people satisfied throughout what might now be a longer working life? By providing them with an increased level of autonomy. Part of me looks forward to a time when I have a family and a partner and I take less of my nourishment from social occasions. Having a little unit around me will make my working life easier, because it is quite lonely otherwise. You don't have to start with your dream job, and your idea of what the dream job might be will change during a working life that will have its share of ups and downs, setbacks and advances. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.